On that, I had some success, me being a gambler and people being what they are. Well, that brings us up to my 21st year, when I became a man, officially.
How did it feel to become a man officially?
I felt I'd been there before.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for our show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Gary Agnew, who is the CEO and co-founder of Ideon Technologies. Welcome to the show today.
Hey, Scott. Good to meet you.
So you have a track record of scaling up businesses. I mean, I think prior to this current company, you were leading Finning International. You spent almost a couple of decades there. How that role prepared you for your current role at Ideon Technologies?
Yeah, I guess I followed my passions over a 23-year career with Finning, sales and marketing, operations, leading people. And then really over the last 10 years or so, increasingly technology was becoming a bigger part of the role I was playing in the business. And that kind of culminated in setting up a new division, Finning Digital. And that was a business we scaled to $500 million in revenue. And so, yeah, following my passions in a corporate context, and then the Finning Digital opportunity provided me a great in-depth experience with technology development. And then I really, was looking for a change for the second phase of my career, and elected to do a swap from corporate to startup.
Just to kind of help baseline everyone that's listening in terms of the context of what we're going to be discussing, what are the challenges with trying to survey and understand the subsurface anomalies when it comes to mining?
Yeah, really, really important questions. I mean, the important context. I mean, the human race has been mining the earth for 40,000 years, and so this is not a new problem. But what's different these days is that most of the near-surface deposits have already been discovered. And so what that's causing the industry is to look undercover and deeper underground for new deposits. And the problem is, Scott, the tools that we use to detect near surface deposits are proving quite ineffective at searching at depth, really is the crux of the issue.
We are seeing the electrification of passenger cars as well as industrial vehicles, for example. And for some of the batteries and storage that are based on more like the lithium, as an example, there are special kind of precious metals that we need to be able to have and have it in large scale to be actually able to produce a new economy. What are some of the minerals that are in particularly difficult to find at a level that's much deeper? And where's the market demand for some of those things and the kind of applications that they're being used for?
Yeah, very, very much. I mean, you touched on a couple of them, Scott, but electrification of society, I think is an important area. Wind, solar, geothermal power are all areas that form part of the energy transition. And so as we shift from fossil fuels to non-fossil fuels, the industry needs, EVs, electric vehicles are a prime example. You need lithium, you need copper, you need cobalt in dramatically larger volumes than the world has ever produced. And the World Bank actually suggests that there's a 500% increased demand in those minerals over the next 30 years. And so really that's the business we're in, is helping exploration and mining companies detect those minerals at depth, so that they can obviously feed the supply chain, but also to be able to extract those minerals in a minimally invasive way. Because clearly, if you want to buy an electric vehicle, you want to understand the supply chain that has created the raw materials for that vehicle has been created in a sustainable way. So that's really the crux of the inflection point I think we're seeing in the energy market today.
So you touch on a number of really critical points. I think just, for example, starting with the growth, right? 500% growth. I mean, it's incredible in terms of what you're talking about in terms of scale. I think most people have this impression that we're trying to replace fossil fuel with renewable energy, when in fact we're actually trying to do that plus the additional capacity or the need for additional new technologies to support, green hydrogen, solar PV, wind turbine, and others. So really, the market keeps on growing, and the appetite and the uses of these things are only going to grow even more. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, I think that this is really critical, is that typically mining has been associated with, let's call it, pollution, externalities, and so forth. Can you juxtapose, the kind of the first to the fourth industrial revolution of, how we've done mining in the past to, how can we be smarter using the kinds of new technologies that you guys are bringing to market?
Yeah, probably the best analogy I can give you, Scott, is the medical X-ray. And if you imagine a time over 100 years ago before the medical X-ray, doctors were left doing hit and miss detection of injury and ailments, and because they really couldn't see inside the human body. And what happened is when medical X-rays and then ultimately CT scans come onto the market, what it helps the doctor do is see inside the human body and detect exactly where the injury or the ailment or anomaly is, and then be able to adapt new surgical methods like keyhole surgery. And so if you imagine keyhole surgery replacing open heart surgery as an example, I think it represents a very strong analogy as the opportunity in mining. And so for years, the industry has been plagued with the difficulties of large blots on the landscape as a result of open cast mining activities. We really see a future where we can image the subsurface very precisely, high resolution, so that the mining company knows exactly where the mineral deposit is. And we know there are companies working on minimally invasive techniques meant to extract those minerals without the scar on the landscape. So we think it's a pretty exciting opportunity, and the medical X-ray provides a great comparison, or at least an ability to see how the transformation can unfold.
What we're talking about is really the underlying technology that was spun out of Triumph, which is Canada's National Particle Accelerator Laboratory. And you're referring to the core IP around the cosmic ray muon tomography. Can you elaborate a little bit more what that is, and what are muons? You may also like our quarterly Astor Perkins event that brings some of the most notable experts and category-leading startups in their area of sustainability and human survival on Earth and in space. To register, visit astorperkins.com/events.
Yeah, so good questions. So muons are subatomic particles. They occur as a result of supernova explosions in space. And those supernova explosions shower the Earth's upper atmosphere with high energy particles. Muons actually travel to Earth in a straight line at almost the speed of light, and they actually penetrate the Earth. The technology, the IP that we have developed, basically places detectors in industry standard boreholes in the Earth, and then we're able to detect the intensity of muon flux in all directions. And so from that, we are able to initially create a radiographic image of density in the area that we're searching. And then we use our inversion technologies to turn that radiographic image into a 3D reconstruction of the density in the area of image and the area of interest.
So I know with, for example, let's say thermal imaging or hyperspectra, you get into, let's say hyperspectra, for example, hundreds of bands that gives you granularity, or in the case of thermal, you get to see the temperature. What kind of information are the muons providing that can help to reconstruct exactly what you're referring to?
Yeah, so basically the science is based on muons lose energy and decay as they pass through dense matter. And so what we're basically doing is detecting the number of muons and the direction they come from. And from that, we were able to create essentially a voxel reconstruction of average density between the Earth's surface and the detector. And so what we create is a clear understanding of density underneath the Earth's surface, where that wasn't possible before. Importantly, because we can determine direction, we are the only straight line imaging technique that's available on the market today. All other geophysical techniques are inference based. So that makes it difficult to precisely locate exactly where the anomaly is. You know there's an anomaly, but you don't know exactly where it's positioned. We solve that problem by giving very good spatial resolution of where the density anomalies are.
And when you talk about density, is that every different types of minerals provide different types of decaying. So you can actually start to profile and classify the kinds of minerals that are underneath the Earth. Is that correct?
Yeah, we see density contrast. And so it's the contrast between the target of interest. So it could be a copper cobalt sulfide and the host rock, which is the surrounding Earth. So we basically see a distinction between density. And so quite often, if you look at base metals, battery metals as examples, they have quite a strong contrast of density compared to the Earth that surrounds it. So we're able to distinguish those two characteristics, or those two bodies.
Now, is there enough of a database to ascertain between the densities as to what those actual minerals are? Or do you have some sampling that's still done to figure out exactly what potentially you're looking at?
Yeah, so density in itself gives you a lot of important clues about what the mineral might be. It doesn't give you the complete answer. And so the way we're developing our business is absolutely muon tomography is our core technology, but we're building the capabilities to be able to integrate other geophysical data sets to create a more high resolution, multifaceted view of the subsurface. So, for example, gravity and magnetics are two other detection methods that, when integrated with muon tomography, provide much, much higher resolution of what's under our feet.
By adding those aspects, you could start to see, for example, the kinds of minerals that have magnetic or more of the kind of iron components that have conductivity, for example.
Absolutely right. Yes.
All right. Very, very interesting. And again, I think one of the points that you mentioned that I think that was quite important is really the only one in the marketplace that can actually do a direct detection of surface anomalies, and that it's not inference based. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, but because we're detecting the directions that muons travel before they hit our detectors, and the rate of muons, we're able to understand precisely, kind of down to like a meter resolution, Scott. We're able to understand precisely what the density was between the detector and the Earth's surface in any particular direction. So what that enables us to do is, from a location perspective, we can precisely locate where the density anomaly is in the Earth. Other techniques, gravity, seismic, magnetics, etc., you can determine that there is an anomaly, but you cannot locate exactly where that anomaly is. And so we help solve that problem and make sense of some of those other data sets.
So it's almost like losing something that's precious, and you have a metal detector and gives you a sense in terms of where you could have lost it, but it doesn't give you that precision that you guys are able to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, great analogy. We're providing the GPS, if you like, that tells you exactly where in the subsurface density contrasts exist. And so we allow the exploration and mining companies to work with much more certainty than with the other techniques.
Now, talk about how deep in this crust or the surface of the Earth can you actually go in terms of examining the muons? And is there a limitation to this technology?
Yeah, so muons do travel up to about 2 kilometers deep into the Earth. We created an effective glass floor, Scott, of around about 1 kilometer. Because technically, while there are muons that go deeper than that, most of them have decayed by the time they go through all of that rock. And so you can still follow the same process, but detection times become much, much longer because you have less background radiation to be able to detect. So possible, but for economic purposes, we've kind of effectively put a glass floor at 1 kilometer.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about your customers, in terms of the kinds of categories of mining that we're talking about and how they go about it, as well as your geographic footprint as well?
Yeah, so in terms of the way the industry works today, the other geophysical techniques are absolutely a part of the tool set. Drilling is an important part of the tool set today, and the industry, invests in 40 million meters of drilling every year to try and find things. The problem with drilling is you get a very localized view of the subsurface, and the industry has to spend a huge amount of money investing in drilling, and it still doesn't really give them the insights they're looking for. So because we can cover large spatial areas, our role really is disrupting drilling. We complement and can add value to the other geophysics techniques, but our role is to help the customer reduce their drilling expenditure and reduce the harmful impacts on the environment that comes as a result of that drilling.
Aside from the environmental benefit is that, you're actually reducing the costs of exploration in the sense that, because they'll have to make trade-off decisions, right? So even if they knew that there were, let's say, certain density anomalies, knowing which areas actually have a larger deposit of certain density, and it's more economically, more feasible or makes more sense from a return on investment to pursue that particular field versus another field where there are some anomalies as well. They can make these trade-off decisions fairly quickly versus the random drilling and sampling that they're doing currently. Is that right?
Don't forget to visit astorperkins.com to register for our next quarterly events. Past and current speakers include Julianne Hough, actress, dancer, and winner of Dancing with the Stars; Damian Vaughn, former NFL player; Neil Gregory, Chief Thought Leadership Officer at the IFC World Bank; and many more. To register, visit astorperkins.com and click on Events.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we love being in the discovery process with a customer when they find a density anomaly. It's always an exciting time, and because there's economic value in the discovery. But equally, Scott, sterilizing an area with certainty so that we can tell the customer there is no density anomaly in this area. You should not invest in further drilling. You should not deploy further capital. Redirect those resources to an area where there is an identified anomaly. Just to give you a sense, over the last 10 years, the industry has spent almost $200 billion on exploration to return 109 billion of economic reserves. That's a minus 45% ROI. So, the industry is really struggling to solve this problem. And the majority of that 200 billion is sort of about 55% of that 200 billion is drilling. And so the industry is using the techniques it has, but those techniques aren't effectively getting the outcomes that the industry is looking for.
So I think any Wall Street analyst will be able to actually, clearly be able to put a cost benefit analysis together on your technology. But the question is, from a legacy industry perspective, how are they actually embracing the solution you're bringing to market? And is adoption as fast as it should be?
Yeah, I actually think the industry is stood up and paying attention. I think when you look at the 10 years of minus 45% ROI, I mean, no business wants a diluted business like that as part of their portfolio. And equally, as we talked about, we have this energy transition that is demanding much higher volumes of particular minerals at way lower impact on the environment. And so I believe we're at an inflection point, Scott, where those two things are coming together in a very forceful way. I think in 2020, we've seen a huge shift forward in the mining industry. The big players are starting to make moves. The juniors are making moves. So I believe we're at the very early innings of this transition. And then certainly the customers we're working with have a lot of appetite for change. Often the mining industry has a pretty bad reputation for the adoption of technology. But what I'd say is when the problem's big enough and the economic opportunity is as it is, we're finding customers very open to driving that change and actually to leading that change from the front.
Now, let's talk about some specific geographies. For example, Australia, which has been very dominant in mining for many years and is a major exporter of minerals and so forth. And they've been actually fairly progressive in terms of use of machineries as well as even experimentation with autonomous vehicles. What's been the specific adoption within the Australian mining industry, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with one of the world's top 3 mining companies in Australia right now, have been over the last year. And they're certainly one of the companies I would say are at the forefront of rethinking the way exploration happens. So I would say very, very progressive. Equally the same here in Canada. We have some very large mining companies, and it feels like there's a new openness to technologies like ours in that context. So yeah, our primary markets are Australia, the US, and Canada, and those are the 3 big markets that we see as critical to our long-term success. And certainly, getting good momentum. I mean, we're still at the early innings, Scott, of growth in our business, but I really can't complain at this stage at the engagement from the industry that we're getting.
Now, one of the key focus for the work that we do is around sustainability, and I'm curious because I think the work that you guys are doing is in many ways a predictive economic indicator. So I'm curious as to understand from you the kind of interest that you're seeing on the oil and gas side specifically to use your technology for exploration of new oil reserves.
Yeah, quite a different story, to be honest, Scott, in oil and gas. Obviously, that industry is at a very difficult few years, and there's a lot of blood on the streets in terms of those organizations reshaping who they are, what their priorities are, their overall footprint. So we have talked to the oil and gas industry. We actually see ourselves more as a monitoring capability in oil and gas. And that's really, if we go back to the point about the effective glass floor at 1 kilometer, oil and gas exploration tends to happen at much greater depths than that. And so, what we've identified is certainly heavy oil applications like the Canadian oil sands, like the California basin, those types of reserves. We can play a pretty significant role in monitoring how oil is extracted and giving more real-time data to optimize that end of the oil business. So, but yeah, not an exploration tool, more of a production monitoring tool for oil and gas.
Understood. I'm going to actually switch gears and really look forward years ahead, to asteroid mining, to lunar mining, to even mining on Mars, and the importance, this absolutely essential need to mine in those extraterrestrial locations for the purposes of being able to actually have the raw materials to then be able to actually build components and systems and essentially a habitable ecosystem. How do you foresee your technology potentially evolving to not just terrestrial but extraterrestrial?
Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't quite say it's on our roadmap, Scott, but it's certainly something we've talked about and as maybe an out there on our roadmap. The neat thing for us is muon tomography is possible on the moon. And so NASA is involved in looking at muon tomography as one of the techniques to help mining on the moon. We're not directly involved in that at this stage. We've got some more near real-time problems to solve, but it's certainly out there as a potential, and certainly the way space travel is moving forward at the kind of pace it is, with SpaceX and Virgin Galactic and so forth. Who knows? That may appear more solidly on our roadmap in the near future.
Fantastic. And my last question for you is lessons learned in terms of any product or project failure, and any insights that you can share with others.
Well, maybe not necessarily a product failure, but certainly one thing I think is an important lesson. We're a science-based business. We were spun out of a science institution here in Canada, and for me, it's about how the spin out happens. Is critically important. The way this business was spun out back in 2013 left a lot of liabilities on the balance sheet of the business, actually to the point where it almost was a thing that stopped the innovation progressing. Now, we were fortunate to have a great sponsor years later who was prepared to do the heavy lifting to help us unwind that problem from the business, and what that allowed is the business then to take on external investment, to flourish and to grow. And so I think when we're thinking about great academic research, the transition from academia to industry is a critically important one. And certainly the lesson I learned or gained over time is how that is done has a massive impact on the ability of the spin out business to be successful. So give thought to not just the immediacy, but how does that business get funding and grow and prosper beyond the walls of academia.
Incredibly practical, and I think especially the areas that we cover in terms of deep tech, this is very much germane. So thank you for that relevancy and points. So with that, I've been joined by Gary Agnew, who is the CEO and co-founder of Ideon Technologies. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks, Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.